Welcome this morning to our meeting. I'll call to order the meeting of the Tennessee Advisory Council on Workers' Compensation. I'm David Lillard, Jr., Tennessee State Treasurer and Chairman of the Council, and again want to welcome each of you to our meeting on August 27, 2015, at approximately 10 a.m. in the Legislative Plaza in the state capitol in Nashville, Tennessee. Before we begin the actual agenda today, I want to congratulate two of our members on their reappointment. Jerry Mayo, who was reappointed. Mr. Mayo, we're glad, and Lynn Lawyer, who was reappointed to the council. And we also want to welcome Mr. Jason Denton, who is a new member of the council. He's recently appointed, and so I know each of you will want to make your acquaintance with him. He's an attorney representative and practices law with Rochelle, McCullough, and Alls. We're glad to have him here with us as a member of the council. All right, the next item is the roll call, so would you call the roll, Ms. Schroeder?
Treasurer Lillard.
Here.
Carrie Dove. Here. Bruce Fox.
Here.
John Garrett. Here. Bob Pitts. Here. Gary Selvey. Here. Paul Schaefer. Here. John Burleson. Paula Claytor. Jason Denton. Here. Sandy Fletchall. Dr. Graves. Troy Haley. Here. John Harris. Lynn Lawyer. Jerry Mayo. Dr. Merle. Greg Ramos. Mike Shinnick. Representative Eldridge.
Okay, so we have a quorum present. The chair declares the quorum to be present for our meeting today. Next item is approval of minutes from the meeting of March 23, 2015. The minutes are in your packet and were distributed previously by the staff. Are there any comments, questions, or amendments to the minutes? If not, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the minutes. I have a motion. Mr. Selvey, second. All right, Chairman Eldridge seconds, so I'll second also. So we have that on the floor. I think we can do this by a voice vote, can't we? Yeah, that's the item. Okay. All right, all those in favor of approval of the minutes from March 23 signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the minutes are approved. All right, our main item of business, in fact, the sole item of business today is a presentation by Mr. Mike Shinnick, who's the designee of the Commissioner of the Department of Commerce and Insurance, and also he serves as Workers' Compensation Manager for the department. Mr. Shinnick, you're recognized for your presentation on workers' compensation, market conditions, and environment.
Thank you, Chairman Lillard, and thank you, fellow council members. We appreciate the opportunity to be before you and share with you some of our findings that we have researched over the last 4 or 5 months. We are thankful to NCCI. Amy Quinn is here today representing NCCI, and we appreciate them working with us on some of the slides that we've used today. And we think you're going to find them very informative, and that by the end of the meeting today, you should have a good picture of the Tennessee marketplace and what has developed over the last year. We start out by looking at 4 industry segments. The voluntary market, which is all the premium in the insurance segment that is not assigned risk, that is not residual market. So these are carriers that are voluntarily writing premiums, and you see the TWCIP. We'll probably use that term for the last time this year because we have a new plan administrator. The new plan administrator is NCCI, and they were plan administrator back before 1998. And they took over in July 1st, 2015. We went to 5 locations throughout the state to present to agents and shared with them some of the unique programs that we have available through NCCI. And then the self-insureds are individual self-insureds, not including governmental-sponsored individual governmental-sponsored self-insureds, and then group self-insureds, not including governmental entities. you can see that we've had a little bit of a downward swing in the voluntary market. Not real surprising, since we had a large rate decrease, a loss cost decrease last year. If you put the changes that we had one in July and one in our traditional March change. They equated to 15%. So you would expect the premiums to be going down with such a large reduction in the loss cost change. So we had about a 5% decrease. Again, not unexpected at all. About $788 million in voluntary business, and the self-insureds were up 15%. Had some increases there, and we're also going to see that in the premium tax development for self-insureds. And then about a 17% reduction in self-insurance groups. And you say, why such a large increase? Well, we had the Healthcare Association that was in the self-insured group mix as of 2014 no longer issued any policies. So we have a pretty substantial reduction there in the self-insurance groups. And then the assigned risk plan was up about 8%. To $69 million, and we'll show you what has transpired since the end of last year. And feel free to jump in here if you have any questions on any of these. We sent these out ahead of time, so you would have an opportunity to review the presentation, so that you might have some questions that would develop along the way. There we go. This is a listing of property and casualty results in 2014. 2014 is preliminary. You will see on each of the 2014 numbers, they are preliminary. They are initial indications of what the premium levels and the losses are for 2014. As we get a little bit more mature, those solidify a little bit more and are a little bit more available as far as maturity is concerned. The personal lines auto is 102% loss ratio. One of the largest, commercial auto, was right there with it. So the auto has not fared too well in 2014. The homeowners, a nice rebound there. The homeowners line has been very troubling for the last 6 or 8 years, and particularly here in Tennessee, where we've had a lot of storm activity. But this is a nice rebound for homeowners at 92%. And this is I should jump back up here and talk to you a little bit about the combined ratio, especially for those folks who have not been with us up until this year. Combined ratio are the insurance company expense ratios plus loss and loss adjustment expense ratio. And if anytime you have a result under 100, you have an underwriting profit. So you see, overall, the total P&C industry had a 3% underwriting profit there in 2014, coming in at 97%. The workers' comp line was at 98%. These are calendar year numbers. They're not operating year numbers. So we'll look at those accident year numbers. We'll look at those a little bit later. This is one that we show every year, and we do this to help you to recall the fact that the workers' compensation line of business typically falls below the overall P&C results. The workers' compensation line, the losses and the loss adjustment expenses are higher. That, maybe workers' comp is kind of a large premium line, and folks really go after that premium dollar. and maybe they're not quite as cautious in workers' compensation as they are in the other lines from an underwriting standpoint. So on average, workers' compensation line is about 5 points less favorable than the P&C lines historically. Okay, we're going to shift a little bit and start looking at some more focused workers' comp results. If we look at 2014, as far as this is indemnity claims, there was a modest increase in the indemnity cost, and still relatively speaking, since 2009, we've had some pretty reasonable results for indemnity increases. This is one of the larger ones we've seen in the last 6 years. So we'll have to kind of watch that. But overall, it's very reasonable. And
is that because more people were employed?
well, that would be an indication that the overall claims dollars were going up. So that's claim severity. So you have an increase in that overall. And that's a function. Sure, it's a function of how many people are in the workplace. So obviously, you get more people in the workplace, you're going to have more claims. But I think what we're seeing here is, and we'll look at another slide as far as frequency of claims are concerned, frequency of lost time cases. But this is severity dollars. This is more temporary total disability and permanent partial disabilities that are being paid on claims on a countrywide basis.
I'd ask members who have a question to seek recognition from the chair and use the microphone since we're recording the meeting, okay? So, Mr. Pitts, you want to be recognized?
I think he just confirmed this is nationwide data,
Yes,
correct?
it is. And I might point out here that the blue line, the blue dash line here, and the dashes that you have on your copies is medical CPI. So we see that the increases in medical severity have tracked pretty closely with medical CPI back to 2009. So both indemnity and medical have performed fairly well. This year it's up a little bit to 4%. I believe that was the severity number for the indemnity as well. So up a little bit here. We'll have to see we'll have to watch that and see if this is beginning of a trend back up to the 6 and 8% level. Okay, this is the claims frequency that I just mentioned. You can see it's down again 2%. If you look back in the last 15 years or so, I think I can recall only one time that frequency went up instead of down, and that typically is a factor of a recovery from a recession, and that's what we saw in 2010. The frequency has decreased 51.1% from 1994 to 2013. So a huge increase. And what do you think would attribute to that result? Safety in the workplace. Would you look at technology? I think technology probably is the biggest factor there, in that we know how to build things more efficiently and more safely, and the safety mechanisms are more sophisticated and built into the manufacturing and also in some of the other segments as well. Excellent underwriting. There you go, Jerry. Okay, this is the combined ratio on an accident year basis. This zeroes in on accidents that occur during the calendar year, and only accidents that are reported in this data occur in that particular calendar year. There are no residual claims from prior years that are developing into the accident year. So we see that we pretty nice trend downward from a 118 high in 2010 to a 95 in 2014. This is on a countrywide basis. We have the individual experience for Tennessee that we'll look at. Tennessee did not fare quite as well as countrywide this year. I think just a change from last year when Tennessee did much better than countrywide. One thing that I like to point out, if you look at those numbers in the gray bar down there at the bottom, those are loss and loss adjustment expense ratios. In 2010, which was our worst year, when companies were really bleeding, there was a 90% loss and loss adjustment ratio. Look at what it's fallen to in 2014. It's dropped 20 points. So as Jerry pointed out, you see some underwriting, tightening up the underwriting ranks. You're also looking at rate adequacy, much more so in 14 than you saw in 2010. So all these factors go into seeing these kind of results on a nationwide basis. And finally, on the nationwide numbers, let's look at pre-tax operating gain ratio. This is the operating results from underwriting, as well as the investments income from the underwriting results. So you see a nice improvement there to almost 15% in 2014. So the last 3 years have been very good. Now, it would be nice to say that these results are going to continue. But if you look at 2005 and 2006 and 7 and 8, you can see that the insurance results are very cyclical. Once you get certain profit level, you tend to see more aggressive activity from an underwriting standpoint, and the results don't fare as well. So wouldn't expect these to hold up too much longer. All right, we'll change pace a little bit here and look at the price increases in the marketplace. This is, again, countrywide. Back in 2013, for the first quarter of 2013, 91% of the policies that were out there renewed with an increase. 7.2% no change, and very little, if any, decrease. Now you move back over to first quarter 2015, and you see just about an even distribution of increase, no change, and decrease. So this is telling us that the pricing is beginning to change, is beginning to soften up a little bit. Maybe the beginnings of a softening pace in the marketplace. Okay, let's shift to Tennessee. If you recall, the voluntary premium in voluntary premium was down 5%, overall, it was down 4%. So you factor into the increase in the assigned risk plan, you have an overall change of minus 4%. That bar for 2014 represents $857 million. And you can see that we were over $900 million back in 2005, 6, and 7. So not quite back to where we were, and certainly a factor there is the loss cost changes that we've experienced since 2004, since the Bredesen reforms, and then the Governor Haslam's reforms. Those combined to a minus 35% change in loss costs over that period of time. So those are definitely becoming a factor in terms of the overall premium level. You have been handed a loss cost filing from NCCI. You have the technical filing, the technical section, and the filing of the loss cost before you. This graph right here came right out of that filing, and it represents the indemnity loss ratios since 2006. This is obviously a very good result, down to 32% loss ratio in 2013. That's policy year 13. Those are all policy year premiums. And that produced a trend factor of minus 4. I think last year it was a minus 3.5. So what you're seeing right there produces a trend, and they use that trend going forward to predict what the loss costs need to be for the upcoming term, for the 16-17 term. Similar downward, or a downward trend, not similar. This trend is not near as steep, but is showing a slightly downward trend. Last year, we used a 0 trend factor in the filing. This year we're using a minus 0.5, and I don't recall a minus number at all in filings, the ones that I've been involved in. Could have been, but I don't recall it. For medical, this is medical. So we got a slight downward trend here. So you would take the 2013 loss ratio at 32 and add that to the 0.701 loss ratio for 2013 for all of the loss experience. Okay, here's the combined ratio. This is one of the more important graphs that I've got here because it shows what's been happening in Tennessee. And you can see that 2010 year when countrywide was 118 accident year ratio, Tennessee was 121.4, so we didn't fare as well. But you can see that cyclical nature of the loss ratio and the expense ratio. So it's ticked up a bit, a little over 5 points since 2013. Something we'll want to keep an eye on, but it's basically at break even. 99.2 is basically at break even. So the thing that we expect in this low interest rate environment is good underwriting results in order to have a little investment income to come through to where overall you're making money in the line. And
Mike,
yes.
how much did the earned premium change?
For the direct premium,
Yeah,
minus 4.
not earned premium.
That's direct premium written. Yeah, no, I don't have earned premium. I'm sorry.
We don't know what the earned premium.
I don't. Okay, this is the slide I updated. Everybody got an update on their presentation materials yesterday, and this is the slide that I updated to reflect the minus 0.9 loss cost change that NCCI is saying that we need. Things are flattening out a bit, in terms of the loss cost change for 2016. And we will get together in October, and the actuaries will testify before you as to what they think is appropriate, and then you will make a decision on what kind of recommendation that you want to make to the commissioner who actually sets the loss cost change. Okay, this is the loss cost multiplier, and let me review what's involved in a loss cost multiplier. You really have two components to a rate. When an insurance company uses a rate on a policy, it's made up of loss cost plus the loss cost multiplier. The multiplier represents the expenses of the insurance company, and as well as the any kind of deviations that the company would plan on using in their numbers. So it would be premium tax, it would be general expenses, it would be commission expenses. So those expenses and profit make up the expense picture, and so there is a multiplier that's tacked on, that's filed with us, with the department, and we review it. We require actuarial reports for the most part, unless it's real small. We require supporting actuarial documentation, and we review those, and we allow those to be filed, and we don't really approve those, but we file them. So I've got a slide coming up here that's going to look at the multiplier distribution in the state of Tennessee. This number right here, the 1.46, is the weighted average loss cost multiplier of all the multipliers that are being used in the state. And you can see that it went up, it ticked up a little bit, but not near as much as it ticked up in 2012 to 2013 and 2013 to 2014. So next year we'll see what happens, but this may be an indication that we're getting ready, that we have peaked or we're close to peaking as far as the overall pricing is concerned on the multipliers. This is a rather busy graph, as you can see, and I secured this from NCCI. The green line, the red line, the red dash line, represents the loss cost changes from one year to the next, and so you can see that we're down close to the 15% level for loss costs in May of 2015. The light blue line is the average net change that insurance carriers are incurring from the prior term, from the prior year. And so what this is saying is that the rate changes, the premium changes for 2014 was minus 6.2% for that entire period. That is for January through December of 2014. This year, it's dropped a little bit more. It's minus 7.2%. One thing that's interesting is the variance. You see that the light blue line is kind of pulled away a bit from the red line, the red dash line. And this is an indication that insurance companies are maybe pulling back on their scheduled credit, or maybe shifting some premium around from one insurance company to maybe a higher rated insurance company, higher rates. So this is something that we'll want to observe in the future, right closely to kind of see what the market is doing. But this looks like the market is kind of holding back a little bit from a pricing standpoint, except for May. In May of 15 had a very aggressive price point there, right at 15%. So we'll have to see if that continues. Okay, now here's the loss cost multiplier slide that I mentioned to you. The median loss cost multiplier is 1.45. The mean loss cost multiplier is 1.46. 80% of the multipliers are between a 110 and a 178. And 20% of the premium represents multipliers that were used above 1.66. So we still got a reasonable amount of premium above the assigned risk multiplier level. You also have a letter from the commissioner on your desk indicating that it's her intent to increase the multiplier to 1.66 in the assigned risk plan. And so that's what it appears that we'll be using next year. That's up about 5% on a multiplier basis. It won't be quite that much if the minus 0.9 loss costs are approved. It'll be about a 4% increase. Here's the tax picture that we have shared with you every year, and you can see the taxes are up overall to $43.4 million, and you see a steady increase in tax revenue since year end 2011. Okay, this is the premium in the assigned risk plan since 1998. This goes all the way back to where Aon was the plan administrator. And you can see that premiums went up quite a bit, very cyclically. I point out that when the premiums are at the lowest, you have your worst business in the assigned risk plan, so you have some adverse selection. When the premiums are highest, you get the best experience. For 2015, based upon the first 6 months bookings, we're projecting about $67 million. So we were at about $65 million in 2012. 2013 was about $65 million. 2014 was about $69 million, and we're going to drop a little bit this year if things continue to hold up. Now, you can see we're not anywhere near the levels of premium in the marketplace after 9/11, and we went way up. There was really a pushback in the marketplace on marginal business, and a lot of that went to the assigned risk plan. A lot of premium, almost over $130 million in 2014 and 2004. And this is a picture of the assigned risk loss cost multipliers. So for the last 4 years, we've seen a steady increase in multipliers. We were down as low as 152. We're up to 166. The report that was provided to us from NCCI showed a 75.3% number, 175.3, excuse me, 175.3. And we took the profit and contingency element out of there, which is what NCCI uses for their companies. We had not been using that historically, so that dropped it down to a 1.68, and then we decided to use a 1.66, which is 1.4% lower than the NCCI number without the profit and contingency, and that number was the same number that was projected last year from Aon, and that was at the level where all the data was included. We actually took out a year because of this graph that I just showed you that had the good experience with large premium levels, and we decided it was more appropriate to leave that number in. If we left it in, it would be 1.66, and that's where we ended up this year. So you have 15, a little bit less than that, to comment. You can see that we're running in pretty good shape in the marketplace as far as the overall assigned risk volume is concerned. 8% of the total volume is in the assigned risk plan. We were up well above 15% back in 2004, 2003, and commissioner basically took action and made some changes in the assigned risk plan to help depopulate the assigned risk plan, and that's what the red line is for. It's a statutory threshold where the commissioner has the opportunity to take action to depopulate the assigned risk plan. So that's what she did. Obviously, is pretty well. The market helped out as well. I will tell you that the 8% is Tennessee. I talked to Jim Now down at NCCI, and he said countrywide in 2014, the level of volume in the assigned risk plan overall was about 6.6%. So we're about a bit above that. Not terribly bad, but certainly a little bit more than what countrywide is right today. And these are numbers that we always like to kind of keep track of, because I have a lot of people call me and saying, you know, we need kind of project what our costs are going to be for workers' comp. How would you go about doing that? And I say, well, if you wanted to be conservative, you could use the assigned risk rate level and go with that. Or if you want to be a little less conservative, you could actually back those off by 8 and 9% in 13, 14, and 15, and then 12% in 2016, because that's the differential between the projected multiplier in the voluntary market, and that's just a guess. That's all that is, just based upon the way it's been trending, and the 166, which is what we're going to plan on using going forward for the assigned risk plan. So we're getting a little bit better spread there, and I think that's a positive. We don't want to really compete with the voluntary market, and these numbers I've already gone over with you. Bookings were up 8%, and then the NCCI plans were up 6.6%. For 2015. Our assigned risk volume for the first 6 months is down 3%. The NCCI plans are down 1.4%. So we're doing a little bit better so far. So we were up 8%. We're down 3%. So we'll take that. And I wanted to include this so that you would have an understanding of what 56-5-314 says, that basically that the commissioner is responsible to make sure that we have balance in the assigned risk multiplier, that we have an appropriate level to cover the expenses and the losses of the plan going forward, and then we check that against the level of multipliers in the voluntary market. So that kind of helps. The statute kind of helps us to make sure that we are in a balanced position. Okay, NCCI is going to provide some assigned risk information in October at your rate meeting. I wanted to produce one slide that has been presented to you previously so that you can kind of get an idea about where the growth and about where the loss is coming from in the assigned risk plan. We have, on a policy count basis, on a grand total of, and you might want to write this in, I didn't enter this, at 12,579 on the policy count. And this is a table that shows what the premium levels and policy counts are at various premium levels, 0 to $2,499 and so on. So we obviously have a large population of small risk. 64%, almost 2/3 of the business is policies that were under $2,500, and a very small population of risks that are over 100,000. 63, as a matter of fact. This period that we're looking at here is from 7/1/14 to 6/30/15, and you can see that we've had some growth in the smaller policies and some reduction in the larger policies. Companies see that premium. They believe that there's more of an opportunity to work with the clients to turn the experience around, and so they take that business, the larger business, out. And that's what we're seeing, from 50 to 99,000, minus 10%. This is on an item count basis. This is not premium. And then, but from an item count basis, the 250 to 499, 40% reduction. Overall, a 7% increase for that period of time. This is a little bit more enlightening. Same break in premium levels, about $64 million in premium for that period of time. This is a booking report. This does not take into consideration audits and cancellations and things like that. So it won't track quite perfectly with the other numbers that I showed you. So keep that in mind. 13.35% of the premium is from policies 100,000 to 249,999, but that's down 12%. And the 250 to 499,999 is down 46%, and a little bit less than that for over 500,000. And I think what you're seeing here is the results of our tail plan. The NCCI has a program called LSRP that's kind of equivalent to the tail plan that we used with the prior plan administrator, and it is a very conservative, cautious retrospective rating plan, and it has upswings to 175. The new plan does. So folks can find a better mousetrap in the voluntary market, and we're good with that. We're happy with that. That's what we want. We want the voluntary market to respond and write that business where possible. We have, for 2014, we had 4 self-insured groups. If you'll note there, Associated Business Builders and Contractors of Tennessee ceased writing business as of 4/1/15. So we'll continue to see a drop in premium. In all likelihood, in the self-insurance groups, we're now down to 3. Insolvencies. This is a list of insolvencies. And we had one addition in 2014, 60 total claims.
Shinnick, Mr. Pitts has a
Yeah,
question
yes.
here. Excuse me.
Mike, before you move on, and you certainly couldn't answer this today, but back to the assigned risk sheet on page 30. It looks like we're making some progress in taking business out of the assigned risk pool above $50,000. A major item falls between $10,000 and $50,000 of about a third of the assigned risk plan. Is there any tweaking we could do that ought to be looked at to further encourage the voluntary market to try to go after some of these counts? It's obvious it's not on their radar at the moment because it went from absolutely no change to 4% up. So there's nothing happening in that sector to take any business out of the assigned risk pool.
We have some programs in place that we actually, if you have an experience mod under 1.11 and you go with no losses, you get a 5% credit. With folks that without experience mod, no losses, gets a 10% credit. Those are statutory programs. They're required by statute. We don't really have anything in particular in the works for below 50,000. What we can do, and Eddie Herrera's here today. He's the plan manager. We can look at what some of the other states are doing and consider if there's some depopulation programs out there. We've got something in the works above 50,000, and NCCI is looking at that for us right now. That will be a depopulation initiative.
I guess that was sort of what I was encouraging, because as I look at this, I don't see a potential significant change in the above 50 going forward. And if we're going to reduce that trend of 8% being in the assigned risk pool, it looks to me like that's something we ought to take a look at. And while everybody was assembled, that might be something we could get a report on in October.
Okay. All right.
Chairman Eldridge has a question here, Mr. Shinnick.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Treasurer Lillard. And this is, I want to address this to Mr. Bob Pitts. Mr. Pitts, I see where ABC has ceased writing workers' comp as of April 1, which is right before we got out of session. What brought that on? I think I know, but just for the record, what?
I don't guess I can say this confidentially, but in the bottom line, the transition in the workers' comp industry, self-insured trust for groups is not the place to be. And we have studied that for about 2 years, and technically we're going to continue to offer a product, but it is going to be in the concept of an insurance company and not a self-insured trust. There are just too many issues in a trust that do not make them market attractive at the present time, and we've moved on to another concept.
I agree with you on that concept. What's going on there? Have all these people been able to find coverages in the voluntary market, most of them in the voluntary market, or did they have to go to assigned risk?
We have moved existing customers into an insurance program. We're now peddling business to new prospects. I guess something else I ought to say, just so everybody has a sense. we fought for years to get self-insured trust. It started out with probably 15. You're now down to 3. That ought to tell you something. But that is also consistent with what is going on in other states. Market forces, shortcomings, and disadvantaged marketing concepts, such as liability to individual companies in a trust, they're driving everyone away, and it simply is not a concept that will do anything other than continue to decline.
And I appreciate that. And I think historically through the last many years, we've seen a lot of these self-insurance trusts go by the wayside in the first place. Like the Tennessee Restaurant Association, to name one. I think you can comment on that.
My only point is, unlike some of the others that have ceased business, we are providing another option.
That's good news. Look forward to seeing that plan. Thank you, the Treasurer.
All right, Mr.
And
Finnick.
I will say that I was with a major insurance company in Handle, Mississippi for a while, and there was a lot of self-insurance groups down in Mississippi because of the marketplace. The marketplace was really tight. It was really hard, and they just didn't want to put any investment in Mississippi. So that grew the self-insurance trust. We've got just the opposite situation here. We've got a reform bill that was put into play a year and a half ago, and it promises to be a very good product overall, and so you have companies that are eager to write business in Tennessee, and so you don't have the demand for the self-insurance group as you once did in Tennessee. This is a severity graph right here. It kind of just shows you the overall unpaid claims liability in Tennessee at about $74 million on a bottom line basis. This is the frequency graph right here. So it shows how many companies had gone in liquidation for each year. So pretty steady back to 2003 when we had a number of insolvencies. This is the Guarantee Fund assessment picture. Nothing since 2005. And last two slides here. This is the picture of the amount of premium that is written by AM Best rated companies above $1 million. So we went into our database and we took everybody that wrote $1 million or more and captured that on a spreadsheet and assigned a AM Best rating to it, but we went online to get the AM Best rating, and we were able to put this graph together. It shows that 52%, over 50% of the premium written in Tennessee is written by a superior company, superior being an A+ or an A++. And 45% were excellent, that's A- or A's. So a vast majority of the premium is written in either superior or excellent companies. We have 2.6 is the other larger category, and it's non-rated carriers. So these are situations to where AM Best does not rate a company. Sometimes they don't make their information available, or they provide limited information, or maybe it's too small, or something along those lines. And 0.5% good, which is a B or B+. And this is a slide that I developed from Steve Klingel's presentation at the AIS, Annual Issue Symposium. It was his wrap-up. And I have showed the Word that he used for the last several presentations to kind of wrap things up with our presentation. And he pointed out that the top line numbers are very solid. And you saw that on a countrywide basis, looking very good. Economic recovery is continuing, a little slow, but it's continuing. So that's a plus. Workplaces are changing rapidly. You know, we talked about that a little earlier about the technology in the workplace. And you have situations with Uber, the transportation company. You have a lot of independent contractors that are being challenged as to whether they're independent contractors or employees. So lots of stuff happening out there, and he wanted to point that out. Benefits challenges are on the rise. There are areas in the country where people are challenging the PPD and the TT benefit levels. Maybe the medical for as well, and we'll have to wait and see what comes out of that. But he says, Steve Klingel, the president of NCCI, and by the way, this is his last year, he's retiring. He categorized this marketplace and where we are right now is calm because of the good industry results that we have had and where we are in the cycle. But he said turbulence is ahead. National Commission, we may see a national commission to review benefit levels. I believe it was 1972 when the National Commission was formed to look at benefit levels when they were very low, and so we may see something come out of that. We may see a push back towards higher benefit levels, and that's not necessarily bad, but what's concerning there from their standpoint is that you have regulators maybe holding back on what they allow as far as increases are concerned, and the increases don't keep level with the benefits levels that may go up. I've already talked about the rapidly evolving workplace, and an exclusive remedy is being challenged in some jurisdictions. So there's some things going on that are a little bit troubling that we need to keep an eye on, and you know what the name of the game is predictability and stability. So if we have a good system of predictability and stability, then we're going to be in good shape for the foreseeable future. And I open it up for questions at this point.
Before for comments and questions, Mr. Pitts is recognized.
Mike, a couple of things. Sometime as data is built to figure out where we are, it takes a while to get there. So, sort of for the record, tell everybody when we can expect to be far enough into the most recent reforms that it's totally reflected in the data that we're seeing. How much more time or how many more years do we have to go forward till it's completely reflected in year-end data?
That's an excellent question, and I wanted to point out the fact that the data from the reforms will not show up until 17. To our next year's rate filing, we'll have 6 months of data for the reforms. So a year after that would be 18 months. That would be the 18, and 19, 3/1/19 would be the first filing that would encompass all of the reforms.
Okay,
excuse me. It won't. We have a medical change in January. So
correct.
That's by law. We're getting some medical benchmarks, so to speak, that are going to be implemented. Those won't, of course, be showing up until in the 20s.
Well, I just, your report, I accept, is a very good report in terms of where things are at the moment, and that's very positive. I'm sure some folks will say, well, after all those reforms, it ought to be going down more than that. And the point simply is we haven't gone long enough to get all the reform data into actuarially where we are. The second thing I wanted to say, and you and Jerry will interpret this as tongue-in-cheek, but I'm very sincere about it. All of you know that for many years I have been very critical of the insurance industry. That workers' comp is a mandated program, and yet largely historically it has been the loss leader under property and casualty underwriting. And I will note for the record that you're below 100% this year, at least preliminarily. And I would observe that this has occurred over an 8-year period to get there. And I commend the industry for that and would simply observe to the two of you that now that they have learned how to actuarially underwrite in workers' comp, I'd love to see this trend continue for about 8 years. But like you, am very nervous that we've gotten a little profit and we'll get greedy about giving away business in order to book business, and we can go back the other way very quickly. But I do compliment the industry for the fact that they've moved strongly in this direction. Thank you.
Mr. Mayo is recognized. Mr. Ramos.
Thank you. Excellent report, Mike. Very good job. On behalf of the industry, thank you very much. I've been in the business 45 years. I've never heard it called calm. Hopefully it'll be calm. With the help of Mr. Pitts and the department, I think we can make it a lot calmer than it's been in the past. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome.
Mr. Ramos is recognized.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for your presentation. Can I go back to slide number 14 or page 14, which is the Tennessee indemnity loss ratio history? I think I understood you to say that and Mr. Pitts was asking about when we start to see the effects of the reform, which of course took effect on July 1st, 2014, and it might be a while before we actually see that data come into effect in these graphs. But this graph shows us what was going on in Tennessee through 2013, correct? And we're talking about the Tennessee indemnity loss ratio history. And I think you mentioned that in 2013, the factor that you mentioned was -4. And in 2012, I believe you said it was a -3.75. Am I understanding you correctly?
In this filing that we have right now, it's -4. In the prior filing, it was -3.5 for trend.
And that was basically for 2012, prior filing?
For all of these terms.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've got you. But does this graph show, as far as the indemnity loss ratio history, a pretty steady downward trend, at least according to this graph, since 2006?
Yes.
Is that consistent with what you've told us during previous advisory council meetings, that this graph reflects what's been going on since the 2004 reforms were placed into effect?
Yes.
Okay. So at least, I guess I sound like a broken record because I've always talked about the utter lack of necessity of any reforms that we had to enact in 2013 that took effect in 2014, of course. But the fact remains that according to all the data we've been able to see, we were on a downward trend as far as indemnity loss ratios ever since the 2004 reforms were effectuated, right?
That is correct. And remember, this is premium levels as well influence these ratios. And so as the reforms took effect, the premiums came down. So these ratios are in that context.
Well, I've always tried to find out where the crisis was that we were, or where the problem was that we were trying to address with the reforms, and I still haven't been able to see it. Let's go to the next page, which is the Tennessee medical loss ratio history.
Yes.
And that too, although the decrease in the medical payouts, or the medical loss ratio history, to be specific and to be precise, although it's not as great of a downward trend as in the Tennessee indemnity loss ratio history, but at least I understand that since about 2006, generally, and I know that in 2009 it looks like that was a high peak, but generally that loss ratio history has been going down as well.
Slightly, yes.
Okay, and I know we've had some leveling out in 2012 and 2013. It seems like the decrease was not very significant. But generally, is that the same kind of trend that we saw in the prior slide, which was the indemnity loss ratio?
Yes, not as pronounced. And I would say also that this is my impression of looking at the data on a countrywide basis is that this is kind of the same pattern that we've seen countrywide.
Okay.
That a downward pressure on the loss ratio for medical.
Okay. Well, of course, I'll be anticipating and anxiously awaiting the 2014 and 2015 data that
Sure.
Mr. Pitts was talking about. But I appreciate it. Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome. I was going to point out here, right here. You can look at that trend. Look at that medical severity trend. This is countrywide, so we're just a reflection of what's happening countrywide.
Okay, other comments or questions by members of the Advisory Council on the very fine presentation by Mr. Shinnick? Thank you, Mr. Shinnick, for that good report. And I want to call to the attention of the Advisory Council, as Mr. Shinnick did when he discussed slide 20 in his presentation, the letter that we received dated today, August 27, 2015, from Commissioner McPeak of the Department of Commerce and Insurance, in which she informs us, as noticed, to the Advisory Council of her intent to increase the assigned risk plan loss cost multiplier, the LCM, from 1.58 to 1.66 effective March 1, 2016. Commissioner McPeak notes at the end of her letter that the Advisory Council may, as you know, provide written comment and recommendation back to the Department related to this intended action within 15 days of the receipt of this notice. So the Council, if it intends to comment on this letter, must act within 15 days of the date, which is August 27th. So I wanted to ask the Council for input as to your preferred method of proceeding on this. Some years the Council has provided comment, and other years we haven't declined to comment because we had no extra information to convey. So I'll open the floor for the will of the Council in this regard. Mr. Pitts, you have things to say?
Yes, sir, as you know, always. I would submit to the other members of the council that I would be willing to make a motion that the council go on record in being positive in their support of the commissioner's action. It seems to be in keeping with trending. It seems to be in keeping with efforts to continue to depopulate the pool. And frankly, it addressed an issue of concern to some of us last year, in which we felt like that the multiplier between the assigned risk pool and what was going on in the voluntary market was not wide enough, which sort of put the pool and the voluntary market in competition with each other. And frankly, some of us encouraged them to look at widening that gap again, and this addresses that subject. For all of those reasons, that would be my motion, but I'm reluctant to just throw it out there without some further conversation.
Are there further comments or discussion about this letter or the position Mr. Pitts has indicated? Mr. Fox is recognized.
I second your motion.
Right, so he's going to make a motion, right?
Did you get my motion?
All right, why don't you state it again for
I think that I can't think of any way more diplomatically to word it than to just simply that the advisory council wishes to express its full support of the commissioner's proposal to raise the loss cost multiplier for all the reasons I've just stated.
All right, Mr. Pitts has moved, and Mr. Fox seconds his motion in that regard to make a statement and to reply to Commissioner McPeak to her letter of August 27, 2015. Is there further discussion or comment about the motion that's on the floor at this point? All right. If there is none, I'll remind members that this is a matter which will be voted on by the 6 voting members of the council. I'm the 7th voting member, but the statute prohibits the chair from voting on anything other than procedural or administrative matters, so it would be the 6 voting members that would vote on this. And Ms. Schroeder, would you call the roll? 6 voting members of the council on the motion.
Carrie Dove. Bruce Fox. Aye. John Garrett. Aye. Bob Pitts. Aye. Gary Selvey. Paul Schaefer. It's unanimous.
All right, it's a unanimous vote in favor. The motion is adopted. The chair would like to personally thank Chairman Jimmy Eldridge of the House, Chair of the House Consumer and Human Resources Committee, for being with us today. We appreciate the chairman's leadership and the committee's leadership in the good work that's being done in the area of workers' compensation and other issues. Also, I'll note for the record that the next meeting of the council is currently scheduled for October 14, 2015 at 10 a.m. here in room 30, so we'll look forward to having y'all here. That's October 14, 2015 at 10 a.m. in room 30. It'll be an important meeting with presentations from our actuaries and others, as was noted earlier during our meeting. Is there any further business to come before the Advisory Council on Workers' Compensation at this point? Mr. Pitts.
Mike, just sort of another one of those heads-up requests. If in your transition from AON to NCCI, if that is going to reflect any departure from how things were organized under AON, is who the participating companies were, how all that works, I wish y'all would come prepared to educate us on what the differences are going to be.
Okay. I would suggest that NCCI prepare that for their meeting in October. Is that all right? Okay.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Shinnick. Any other comments, et cetera? If not, Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. I have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Chair will second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. If those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and we're adjourned. Thank you.